So, this is a knife that I put scales on a little bit back, a couple weeks maybe. Forgot to make a video on it, but I'll do that now. So, the knife is originally, as you can tell kind of by the shape, it is originally a throwing knife. So that's why there were no scales on it, just the metal part of the knife, and it was used for throwing. This was the sheath that came with it. This was flat across, and the knife sat flat inside of it. I have since modified the sheath. I have taken off the labeling so it looks a little bit better. And then I put on just a little Velcro strap. What I did is inside here, use some epoxy. So if I just epoxy that in, super glue or hot glue would probably work. And now I have a nice little strap. Hold the knife inside there, and it looks pretty good. It's all black. I like that. Obviously the knife just slides in, and then you can take the Velcro, tighten that down. Knife shouldn't move around. The knife itself. So the knife is a Coleman knife. You see that? It's pretty faint, but it says Coleman right in this area. Pretty faint. So it is a Coleman knife and a Coleman throwing knife. But I've put Cherry scales onto this. So these scales are a little bit thicker than you would usually see on a knife, with the thickness being total about 1.5 inches. 3/4 on each side. This is about 1.5 inches thick, right? And so that seems a lot, but that way, when you're holding it, it's easier to whittle, right? So you never really hold a knife like this, right? You usually end up holding it like this. And this way, because it has more, size, it's a little bit more comfortable to hold that way. So first, I rough cut these scales. You just, rough size. Then I epoxied them on. So these holes, I drilled these holes to match holes that were already in the tang, or the knife blade, the actual metal of that knife. There were already holes there, so I drilled the holes in the wood. And then I glued on the scales using epoxy. So a 2-part epoxy, something along these lines. Once with a plunger, and to keep those good, I just have nails in the top. That way the epoxy is not going to leak out and dry up. And so that is how, it looks like it's leaking out the bottom of it though. Ugh, it's all over the place. I should probably just toss that. I'm not going to be using it anyway. So that is how I connected it. I just used epoxy, and then I also epoxied these pins, and these pins are actually just nails. So this big pin here was, I believe, a 5-inch nail, and then these smaller ones were just 16Ds. And so those are just nails, right? That's really strong, right? So most people use brass or copper because it looks nice, but that's a very strong nail, so there was quite a bit more strength in that. And then obviously I just shaped the handle. I rounded everything over, right? Took these back so that way it's more comfortable like that. Smoothed everything up, and that's that. Obviously sand it to the shape, and then smooth it over with a rasp and sanders, and then sand it, progressively sharper and finer files, and you can get to this point. Then what I did is I just kind of peened these nails over a little bit with just a hammer, just a steel face hammer. I just kind of peened those nails over a little bit. You just whack them around, and that way they're not, pointy, right? There's not an edge for your finger to catch, but instead it just kind of rounds over. And I sharpened the knife, right? So this knife, very sharp. I could shave with this knife, right? So it's a very sharp knife, but it's not an amazing quality. So the knife doesn't stay sharp very long, but you can see just how that edge is so sharp, right? So it is very sharp. Here, I'm gonna see if hear that, right? So very sharp knife, dangerous, but because it's not a super high quality knife, the edges actually will roll over when I'm just whittling with it. But I don't mind. I'll just sharpen it back up. It just takes a couple hits on the strap. So that's that. use cherry scales on a throwing knife, and that is this knife. So what I had to do, because this knife was hollow ground, you can actually see some of the remains of that original grinding that the factory put on. This knife was hollow ground, and I didn't like that. I wanted a flat grind. So on the 80 grit Waterstone, I just roughly ground this, relatively flat. Those little, marks you see where the grinding used to be, they'll come out in a couple years as I sharpen the knife. So I just left that out and then came back in with progressively finer grits of paper and got to this point. And it's very simple. Again, that's like a weekend project, and it works well. So I did all the sharpening, most of it, while the knife had no handles on it, because it's a lot easier to handle. It's a lot easier to move around on a stone. So that's how I worked with that. And it's very simple. You could obviously use anything for the handle, anything you want, because it doesn't get a lot of, abuse. Like an axe handle, you want it to be a good strong hardwood. This still should be a hardwood, but it doesn't have to be. If you have something else that looks good, it doesn't have to be a hardwood. But I did pick cherry because it ages very nicely. Cherry gets nice and dark once it ages, so that's that. And I think that's it for the moment. So stay tuned.